Welcome to the Crime Story channel. Today, I bring you a chilling and haunting tale, the tragic school shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, in 2018. The shooter, responsible for the loss of 17 lives and the injury of 17 others, has recently been sentenced to life in prison without parole. This heartbreaking event shocked the world and left an indelible mark on the community of Parkland. If you find this story captivating, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you more gripping stories. Let's dive into the story. On February 14, 2018, a day meant to celebrate love and connection turned into a nightmare. In Parkland, Florida, at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, the quiet halls were suddenly filled with chaos and fear. The calm, peaceful community was shattered in a moment, and in its wake, 17 lives were lost, and many others were forever changed. What should have been an ordinary school day became the deadliest school shooting in modern U.S. history. The weapon used was an AR-15 assault rifle, a symbol of the deep divide in American gun control laws. It was a weapon easily obtained by someone just 19 years old, capable of causing unimaginable destruction. This tragedy, however, wasn't just about the horror of that day. It was about the ripple effect it left behind, sparking a national movement for change, igniting a conversation about gun control, and giving a voice to those who had experienced the pain firsthand. This is the story of the Parkland school shooting, its aftermath, and the fight for a safer future. At 2:40 p.m. on February 14, 2018, the calm atmosphere of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, was violently shattered. What had begun as an ordinary school day turned into an unimaginable tragedy as Nikolas Cruz, a former student, opened fire on his classmates and teachers. The sound of gunfire echoed through the halls, sparking chaos and panic as students scrambled to escape and hide. In a matter of minutes, 17 lives were lost, and 15 others were left injured. The violence was swift, and its impact would be felt far beyond the walls of the school. Cruz, a 19-year-old with a troubled history, used an AR-15 assault rifle, a weapon that has become synonymous with mass shootings in the United States. What makes the tragedy even more disturbing is that this weapon was legally purchased. The AR-15, a semi-automatic rifle, is easily accessible in many states, including Florida, where an individual as young as 18 can purchase one. In a country where the legal drinking age is 21, Cruz was able to buy a weapon of mass destruction with little more than an ID and a few $100s. This stark reality highlighted the deep flaws in the gun control laws and sparked a national conversation about the ease with which such deadly weapons can be acquired. As the gunfire continued, teachers and students who had never imagined their school would be the site of such violence found themselves caught in the terror. Police and ambulances arrived quickly, but the damage had already been done. The streets outside the school were flooded with flashing lights as families and friends anxiously waited for news, many holding on to the hope that their loved ones were safe, while others faced the agonizing reality that they wouldn't be coming home. The school, once a place of learning and community, had now become the scene of a heartbreaking tragedy. And as the survivors were rushed to safety, the question on everyone's mind remained: how could something like this happen? The tragedy of February 14, 2018, not only brought forth heartbreaking loss but also revealed countless stories of bravery and selflessness in the face of unimaginable terror. The victims of the Parkland shooting were not just numbers, they were individuals with hopes, dreams, and families who will forever feel the absence of their loved ones. The teachers, students, and staff members who lost their lives that day became heroes, standing in the line of fire to protect those around them. Among them was Scott Beigel, a geography teacher, who, upon hearing the chaos unfolding outside, ran toward the danger instead of away from it. When the shooter approached his classroom, Beigel unlocked the door to allow his students to escape. He didn't hesitate to put his own life on the line to protect those under his care, and in doing so, he paid the ultimate price. His act of bravery exemplified the selflessness that many display when facing life or death situations. Tragically, Scott Beigel's life was taken, but his courageous actions will forever be remembered. Another hero that day was Aaron Faze, the beloved football coach and security guard. Coach Faze, who had been stationed on the school grounds, sacrificed his own safety to shield students from the barrage of bullets. While others fled in panic, he stood firm, his priority focused solely on the students he cared for. He was fatally wounded, but his final moments were spent protecting others, a testament to the dedication and love he had for his students. His loss sent shockwaves through the community, leaving a void that could never truly be filled. Chris Hickson, the athletic director, also ran toward the gunfire, as a leader should. In a split second, his instincts kicked in, protecting his students at any cost. Despite the danger, Hickson's priority remained clear: ensure the safety of those under his care. His actions that day saved lives, though he too tragically became one of the victims. Perhaps one of the most heart-wrenching stories from that day comes from Peter Wang, a student in his Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps (JROTC) uniform. Peter was last seen holding the door open to allow others to escape, demonstrating incredible courage in the face of fear. But as the gunman advanced, Peter was shot and killed, leaving a community in mourning. His selfless act of bravery did not go unnoticed, and the entire country recognized him as a hero. Peter was laid to rest with full military honors, a fitting tribute to a young man who embodied the values of sacrifice and service. In addition to these heroes, students like Alyssa Alhadeff and Meadow Pollock, who also lost their lives, became symbols of the strength and resilience of the Parkland community. Alyssa, a soccer player with a bright future, was remembered by her teammates and the U.S. national soccer team for her strength. Meadow Pollock, a senior with dreams of becoming a forensic scientist, had her life cut short, but her memory lived on through the advocacy of her family and friends. The names of these young souls became synonymous with both loss and heroism, and their stories were shared far and wide as a reminder of the preciousness of life and the cost of violence. As the community came together to mourn the loss of these bright, promising individuals, it was clear that the legacy of these victims would not be forgotten. Their bravery in the face of horror inspired countless others to fight for change, and their memory would fuel the movement for safer schools, stricter gun laws, and an end to the epidemic of gun violence in the United States. The survivors of the Parkland shooting found themselves facing an entirely different battle, a battle that didn't end when the gunfire stopped and the ambulances departed. While the families of the victims were left to mourn their loved ones, the survivors had to confront the physical and emotional wounds left behind. For many students and teachers, the trauma of witnessing such an act of violence became a burden they could not escape. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, became an uninvited companion, haunting their every thought, their every step. Survivors' guilt overwhelmed them, making them question why they had made it out alive when so many others had not. The mental and emotional toll of that day manifested in different ways. Some survivors struggled with flashbacks, unable to move past the terrifying images of their classmates being shot, the chaos and the screams. The faces of their fallen friends were imprinted in their minds, leaving them unable to escape the memories. Others found it hard to return to school. The very place that was supposed to feel safe now became a place of deep anxiety. As time went on, the emotional weight became too much for some. Less than a year after the shooting, the pain of living with such trauma became unbearable for a few survivors. They felt trapped in their own minds, struggling to process the horrors they had witnessed. Some, despite receiving therapy and support, tragically took their own lives. Their deaths were a painful reminder of how deeply such a tragedy can affect not just those who lost their lives but also the survivors left behind. These young people, who had so much promise and potential, were now gone, their stories cut short by the long-lasting effects of gun violence. Their stories serve as a call to action, to not only honor their lives but to ensure that mental health care is prioritized for survivors of mass violence. The trauma they faced, and continue to face, is not just a personal struggle, but a societal issue that needs attention. The community's efforts to heal must include helping survivors rebuild their lives physically, emotionally, and mentally. The loss they experienced will never fully fade, but we can help them carry the weight of it in a way that allows them to live, to heal, and to honor the memories of their fallen friends. In the aftermath of the Parkland tragedy, a powerful movement began to take shape, led by the students who survived the shooting. The pain of loss gave rise to a voice demanding change. The #NeverAgain movement quickly gained momentum, with students like Emma González at the forefront, calling out lawmakers for their inaction and for allowing such tragedies to continue. These young survivors, shaken by the violence they had witnessed, turned their grief into a rallying cry for stricter gun control laws and safer schools. Emma González became one of the most recognizable faces of this movement. Her speeches, raw with emotion, captured the attention of the world. As she stood before crowds of supporters, she spoke not just for herself, but for the many other students and families affected by gun violence. Her call for action was relentless, demanding that those in power take responsibility and ensure that future generations wouldn't have to live in fear. González's passionate words ignited a nationwide conversation about gun control and the need for immediate change. Her leadership made it clear that the survivors of Parkland were not going to let this tragedy fade into the past without a fight. The Parkland shooting ignited a firestorm of political debate, dividing the nation over the issue of gun control. Survivors, victims' families, and activists quickly became vocal in their demands for change. On one side, many called for stricter gun control laws, particularly the banning of AR-15-style rifles, the weapon used in the attack. On the other side, there were those who argued that protecting Second Amendment rights was paramount, fearing that restricting access to firearms would infringe on American freedoms. This ideological divide fueled an intense public outcry, as emotions ran high on both sides of the debate. The Florida state legislature, under immense pressure from the public and the victims' families, voted on a bill that would have banned the AR-15 rifle and similar semi-automatic weapons. However, despite the emotional pleas of those directly affected by the shooting, the bill was voted down. The decision was a bitter blow to survivors like Emma González and other activists who had worked tirelessly to raise awareness and demand action. For many, this vote was a clear sign that their voices were being ignored. It was a moment of deep frustration, as they realized that, despite the tragedy they had endured, the change they so desperately sought was not guaranteed. The failure to pass the bill highlighted the deep political and social divides that continue to make meaningful gun reform an uphill battle. Nikolas Cruz, the alleged shooter, was apprehended shortly after the attack. His arrest brought a sense of temporary relief to the devastated community, but the questions surrounding the tragedy only grew. Cruz faced multiple charges, including 17 counts of first-degree murder, one for each of the innocent lives lost in the shooting. As he was taken into custody and his mugshot surfaced, the community and the nation grappled with the complexity of the situation. How could someone so young, a former student of the very school he attacked, carry out such a horrific act? Was there a way to prevent this from happening? The legal process that followed was intense. Cruz's trial would not only serve as a quest for justice but also as a public examination of the failures that allowed this tragedy to unfold. As the legal proceedings began, it became clear that the focus was not just on Cruz's guilt, but also on the broader questions surrounding gun access, mental health, and the responsibility of institutions. While the trial of Nikolas Cruz would eventually begin, the questions that haunted the community remained unanswered. How could such a tragedy have been prevented? What steps could be taken to protect future generations from experiencing similar horrors? These questions weighed heavily on the families of the victims, the survivors, and the entire nation, as they continued their search for healing and for answers that might prevent another loss like this from ever happening again. The Parkland shooting was a wake-up call for the nation, a stark reminder of the urgent need for change. It sparked a movement that continues to challenge the status quo of gun laws in America. In the aftermath of this tragedy, the survivors and the families of the victims became powerful voices for reform. They refused to let the horror of that day fade into the past. Their fight for stricter gun control laws became not just a political battle, but a moral one. The bravery they displayed in the face of such devastating loss served as a beacon of hope for future generations, showing that even in the darkest times, there is power in standing up for what's right. The #NeverAgain movement, led by the students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, gained momentum as they took their grief and transformed it into action. From peaceful protests to powerful speeches, these young leaders refused to be silenced. They demanded change, not only to protect their own futures but the futures of all young people in America. The March for Change became a symbol of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a community determined to ensure that their loved ones did not die in vain. The story of Parkland is far more than a tragic event. It's a story of transformation, where pain became a catalyst for change, and loss became a rallying cry for reform. The voices of those who survived and those who lost their lives continue to echo in the fight for a safer future, and they will not be silenced until meaningful change is achieved. The journey is not over, but the path forward is clear, to honor their memory by ensuring that what happened at Parkland never happens again. The story of the Parkland shooting is not just a story of tragic loss, it's a story of immense courage, resilience, and the relentless fight for change. The survivors and the families of the victims continue to stand as beacons of hope, demanding a future where no more lives are lost to the senseless violence of gun shootings. Their voices, filled with the weight of their experience, have inspired millions across the world to join the call for stricter gun control laws and safer communities. Though the wounds of that day will never fully heal, the movement sparked by Parkland has become a powerful force for transformation. The survivors, many still grappling with the trauma of the attack, have turned their grief into action. They've shown that from the darkest of days, light can emerge in unwavering resolve to ensure that future generations don't experience the same heartache. Their mission is clear, to make sure that Parkland is never forgotten and that the tragedy is never repeated. As the sun sets over Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, the memorials for the victims stand as a silent tribute to their lives and the promise that their deaths will not be in vain. The fight continues, driven by the memory of those lost and the courage of those who survived. The message remains the same, never again. And this time, the world is listening. Thank you for watching and joining us in reflecting on this heartbreaking story. The events at Parkland have left an everlasting impact, and we continue to honor the lives lost and the resilience of the survivors. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. Your support keeps us going, and together, we can ensure that these stories are remembered and shared. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.